Hello and welcome to In the Line of Hire, the show that brings you instant reaction and views on the brilliant BBC TV show, The Apprentice. I was lucky enough to be part of the Apprentice journey by winning Series 4 back in 2008. And if you know me, you already know that because I go on about it all the time still. It was a long time ago, but I'm still loving the fact that I won Series 4. And over the next 12 weeks, or next 10 coming weeks now, we'll be running a series of shows looking back on the class of 2022 with some very special guests. One of them special guests actually is going to join us every week, and that is our resident expert on business psychology, our current COO of the assessment platform Phoenix 51, my business partner, Chris Wimshurst. Chris, how you getting on?
I'm very well, thank you, Lee. Very well. I was eagerly anticipating this week's podcast. In my formative years, I actually worked within the drinks industry for Bacardi and Jack Daniels. So I have working knowledge of this, and I was really interested to see what kind of creative concepts the groups came up with.
Absolutely, yes. I have some stories on Chris about his time at Bacardi, but that's probably for another show, to be fair. Chris is going to be sharing the analysis and the data on each of the different candidates using the platform Phoenix 51, and we'll be coming back over to Chris later on in the show. You can follow us on Twitter, on Instagram. We're going to be LinkedIn interactive with the live streams as well on YouTube, and also, of course, LinkedIn Live. You can download us as a podcast as well via Audio Boom. So if you want to get the fix of In the Line of Hire with all of this brilliant information on The Apprentice, you know where to go. Go and hit the socials. You'll go and find us. Now, look, I'm absolutely delighted this week to be joined by the 2011 winner of The Apprentice, the CEO of STYLIDEAS, inventor and business partner to Lord Sugar, Tom Pellereau. Tom, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Very nice to be on. Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, Series 7 winner, so following in your footsteps, I suppose. And I love the fact you say a privilege to have been on The Apprentice. But the result is a privilege, but being on it itself, I think it should go down as some kind of torture, really, in itself, rather than necessarily a privilege. Maybe you enjoyed it a little bit more than I did, but certainly I wouldn't. Would you do it again, Lee? I know Mark's very keen. Mark is very keen to be like, we get all the apprentices, but all the winners, and we do apprentices winners last to the death or something like that.
Yeah, like the champions are champions or something like that. Well, we had it's funny actually. You referenced Mark. We had Mark on. He was absolutely brilliant last week. We had Mark on last week, and he is keen. You are absolutely right. And yeah, I would, Tom, to be honest, I would. I think probably because I won 3 seasons before you won, I'm probably still, my mind just thinks back of all the good stuff rather than just some of the bad stuff, the torture that we went through, especially in the interview process, which I'm sure the class of 2022 are gonna enjoy as well. Now, look, I'll be honest with you, listeners and viewers, Tom is an incredible individual to have on this week. He's invented famous brands such as Starfile, Style Pro, and most recently Style Smile as well. Current, as I said, business partner to Lord Sugar as well. Tom, how has it changed you? Because you mentioned Series 7, but you were also the first person to win the new format of the show, of course.
Yeah.
Up from Series 1 to Series 6, the format of the show was to go and essentially work for Lord Sugar. But ultimately for you, Tom, it was about investing in your own business. So how's your journey been? Tell us a little bit about that, Tom.
Well, as you say, it's a very different one. So I'm based in St Albans. I think you were at Vigeland, weren't you? Just down the road from me in Radley. Is that where you worked?
We were actually ended up being based in Brentwood in Essex. Then we moved to Loughton. But yeah, we did some work at Vigeland as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's very different. It was a very, very good idea to change. The Apprentice originally, when it first came out with Tim, and then through to your series, was a revolution in its time. That concept of winning a job, 100,000 a year, that was absolutely incredible possibility. And I think it was right at Series 7, when I did it, that it needed a bit of a change. I think the world was much more interested in entrepreneurialism rather than getting a job. It's sort of getting a job for life is sort of what started careers a long time ago, and now it's very much you create your own business. That mentality is very much changed. I think success in people's mind now is probably not necessarily having a job, it's having a business which create jobs. And Lord Sugar certainly gets a massive buzz out of helping small businesses start and then get going. And in terms of what it's been like, it's actually very similar to the Apprentice experience. Working with him as a business, because you're a small business, you're doing tasks the whole time, you're trying to design new products, get them into Sainsbury's, into Tesco's, doing the gross margins, importing the stuff, working things out. The major difference is obviously you're employing people, and so you have that sort of side of it and the contractual side of it. Things take a lot longer, but I'm very lucky. It's completely changed my life winning, as I'm sure, I think people think that, the cameras stop rolling and then it's just like the end of it and it kind of fizzles out. No, it's for someone like me who likes inventing things. I didn't understand that business side of it. I've had to learn that with him, having his mentorship, his guideship, the Mike Rays and all. I'm sure you remember half the people. John Dumont, Mike, Roger when he was here, he recently retired. Those guys are really, really helpful, right? In making things happen. So I was very fortunate. I don't think I would have won yours. I think Helen would have won it if it was about a job. Interestingly, I'm not sure I would have even made it in the final 5, to be honest. Got through that.
We were talking in the green room, weren't we? We were talking in the green room about kind of records and that sort of stuff. And we had the wonderful Karina on our first week, and her record was absolutely brilliant. I have to say it's very similar to my record, which I've just said was pretty much absolutely brilliant. But she was better than my record. But Mark actually lost quite a few tasks. I mean, I think he was in the boardroom quite a few times. How was your record, Tom, in terms of tasks to boardroom?
Mine is still the worst lossing ratio. I think I lost 7, maybe, but definitely 5. And I was in what we used to call the pullback, which is when you're in the final 3. I think I wasn't actually in that many times, although as you get more towards the end, there aren't that many people to go back in, right?
No,
sure. So once you get to a certain stage, you're all back in, which is those were tricky. There was one I remember when I won my first task by £5.42. That was the winning margin, and if I hadn't won that task again, I would have been toast, because that I think would have been 6 losses in a row. And
he might have had the finger out for a different reason.
Exactly, because he was already accusing me of stalking him at that stage. Already. Yeah.
Brilliant. I mean, £5.42. That is amazing. So you think about that £5.42. That is literally could have changed your life. And that's what we talk about in fine margins in elite sport, or we talk about that in business and so on. So it is fine margins, isn't it? You never know what can happen. You've got to take your opportunities. Now, talking of taking your opportunities, what do you make so far? I mean, we're 3 episodes in now. What do you make so far of the class of 2022, Tom? Like, who for you do you think I know since we were on it, I know you was on it after me, of course, but since we were on it, the production, the wardrobe and all that has changed so much. I mean, these people in Ultra HD look absolutely incredible compared to my dodgy suits back in the day. But what have you made of the class of 2022 so far?
Have you watched any of your ones back?
I know what I don't mind. I've got a proper ego, right? In case none of you ever noticed, right? But even I haven't watched my Apprentice ones back. Only once when we first came out and we first watched them. That's the only time I've seen them. To be fair,
the TV's improved a lot. So in answer to your question, right, the first 3 weeks are very much a lottery. I think you can be the right place in the right time or the wrong place at the wrong time. I think in my week 3. Luckily, our task got extended by 15 minutes or half an hour, and I was determined not to give up. And I managed to use that half an hour to buy the tea on the sourcing task that we desperately needed. And if I hadn't managed to and I remember I got the TV crew to run across Covent Garden, and you know how much gear those boys are carrying. We ran from the Savoy across Covent Garden. It's a long old sprint to get this tea, to ensure that we had the tea. And if I hadn't got that tea, I probably would have been out. So it's a bit of a lottery. There are some people who are shining. There are some people who, I'm sorry, poor old Navid. I had him in the sweepstake in my company, and No Chance Navid is what I called him personally, because it was like he was a very nice guy, I'm sure, but he didn't feel like he was going to last too long. And when you see, them doing the measurements, and he's in charge, and he's a pharmacist, so clearly he's a bright guy. He knows how to do, he knows how to make. Pharmacy is huge amount of math, a huge amount of this many milligrams of this, and blah blah blah. And he's sort of being a bit hopeless. It was a little bit disappointing, and the girls had to completely take over.
What's your view, Tom, on that? Like, do you think sometimes, certainly in the early rounds, and I do agree with you, in the early rounds it is a little bit of a lottery. It's a bit of a bun fight, isn't it? Everyone's kind of just fighting for their own kind of position and make sure. I had a plan. My plan was don't get fired in week one. Obviously, it sounds simple, right? But do not get fired in week one. Like, you can make sure that you don't. And then the rest of my plan was to contribute, to work really hard, to make sure that I was present in every single task, so that. And actually, that probably goes to, I was never in the final three of the boardroom, right? So that probably means that my teammates were like, yeah, he's done well, he's done okay, so I'm not bringing him back in. And then obviously, once you get to the top five, anything can happen. I felt like if I can get to the top five, who knows what might happen. But with the likes of Navid and with the likes of some of the other candidates like Connor that went last week and stuff, do you think they play it wrong? Like, it not necessarily it's a game, but I swear some people don't realise that if you work together as a team, you've got more of a chance of winning, and if you win, you can't get fired. I mean, that's a simple equation, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, Harry basically talked himself into the final three. He went into the boardroom and he was like, I didn't do bad stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like, he was putting his hand up. He was on the losing team and he's putting his hand up saying, trying to point out to Lord Sugar how he'd done good stuff, but he was on the losing team. So he then immediately he then alienated himself from everyone else in the team, who were then like finding things that Harry had done wrong. And also he brought Lord Sugar to his door, whereas someone like, actually, I think it was maybe Nick in the first week was like, we didn't do that well. It was rubbish. I'm sorry.
Well, it's interesting actually, because you bring up Nick, and obviously Nick was project manager this week. So the non-alcoholic drink task, I thought it was quite an interesting task. It was very, very, I suppose popular now in terms of non-alcoholic drinks. And Lord Sugar made him project manager for this week, right? So he had no choice. And he was paired up against Sophie once they mixed the teams up. How do you think they got on as project managers or as team leaders this week, Tom?
I think Nick had his style. I don't think it's what we were expecting of his style.
He was quite forthright, wasn't he?
He was, wasn't he? He wasn't having any of it. He was like, right, this is how it's going to be. It worked out for him. It would have gone if he hadn't won, it would have been very bad for him. I think he probably would have left, as it were, because he didn't listen to a word anyone else was saying.
Yeah. I mean, out of interest, do you think that is his natural leadership style, or do you think that's something he put on?
I don't think it is, but only time will tell. He didn't strike me as the kind of, invade Poland kind of guy. But he had a vision, and his branding was actually very nice. Unfortunately, it tasted awful, but luckily enough people saw the branding.
I quite liked it. Chris, do you want to come in and talk to us a little bit? I'm just sharing the screen now with the Phoenix 61 platform. What sort of data have we got on some of the candidates so far? It still looks like to me the ladies are, even though the groups have been mixed up, the ladies are still doing very, very well this week again.
Yeah, so I think let's revisit the first 2 weeks where the girls obviously won the first two tasks by a country mile, really, and the boys were a shambles. And actually, mixing the groups up, we would have hopefully seen some of the boys come forward and naturally maybe been able to shine when you've got the genders that are actually kind of interspersed with one another. But the statistics haven't actually shown that. And if anything, I think because the girls are such a strong group, what it's done is it's actually given the girls more of an opportunity to shine, because actually they've been split across two groups. So what you've got here in terms of the statistics, if you look, that out of the remaining 13 candidates that we've got within the mix, 6 of those are female, essentially. So you've got Amy, again, the consistent performers, Amy and Catherine in the top 3. So Amy on 19 points, Catherine on 17. but actually out of those top 6, they're all girls. So I think that what it's really been interesting just to see is that actually rather than giving the boys a chance to shine, it's actually given more of the girls a chance to shine. And we've actually seen some performances from Brittany and Harpreet, who we haven't really seen in the first two episodes.
It's interesting. Tom, what do you think of that? I mean, do you agree broadly with the data that you're seeing there, in a sense of actually the people that are kind of at the top again in week 3 are, the girls essentially again?
It's very difficult to tell. I feel that Amy's potentially due a fall. I think that Lord Sugar wanted her to be pulled back. Interesting. He doesn't often say, "Are you sure of your selection?" to the PM. Usually, as you know, Lee, he just wants to get on with it.
Just get it done. Yeah.
He pointed to her and said, "Are you sure?" And I have a feeling that he wanted to have a go at Amy. Personally, because I think the branding was quite strongly hers, and the colouring in it was pretty awful, pretty average really, and she didn't sell that. And he specifically said, "Amy, you didn't sell anything," and it's very unusual. And as a project manager, I found that you can use his comments to help you understand what he wants,
where his thought process is. This is excellent insight. Yeah, definitely.
Like, for example, there was one task that I was on where I knew I'd made no sales. Right, I knew I'd made no sales because it just wasn't my gig on that particular one. And in the boardroom, he had an opportunity to tell the PM, Tom made no sales. He said it about somebody else, but he didn't say it about me. And I was like, that's curious. Why did he not say that? Because I think he was like, I've seen enough of Tom. I want to see someone else. So he deliberately pointed the finger at someone so that they could then be picked, and blah, blah, blah. So I think Amy looks good at the moment, but I suspect she might have a bit of a pullback. Come down. I think Sophie, one thing also, Lee, it's a long process, right?
I agree.
It takes a lot of energy, and it's not for everybody. And I was quite unimpressed with Sophie's body language at the end of that task. She was very sitting back in the chair as a project manager. She was slightly, when she was in the final 3, she was slightly resigned to the fact that I'll fight this up. I should probably go.
I might go. I might
go. And actually, I probably deserve it. And also, but she wasn't fighting. She wasn't at it. Like, I want this. She was like, you know what, I've messed up here. So I worry for her in the future that she's finding the process very tiring, and therefore it's not really for her. But I did love her answer when he said, so who do you think should go? And she sort of looked and she stared and she almost stared him out for a little bit, didn't she? She sort of both. Yeah, it's just absolute TV girl. I can't do it the way she did it. It was just both. They're both rubbish. It's just like.
We must mention Shama and wish you all the best. I know that I mentioned her earlier in the show, but for Shama to be able to have to pull out of the process is a real shame. And actually, Tom, there is an argument from Sophie's perspective that if Shama was still in the process, maybe he would have fired both of them this week, because I think all of the avid viewers of The Apprentice probably can work out that there will be at some stage a double firing, should we say, during the week. So maybe Shama inadvertently saved a couple of firings on this week's episode. What do we think about the boys? I mean, let's talk about Nick quickly, because he was, as we said, he was appointed project manager by Lord Sugar. He had to step up. To be fair to him, he did. He stepped up, and management style, as you touched upon earlier, was very direct, very. He was trying to be really assertive, and as you said, Chris, it didn't feel like it was his kind of his
natural game,
normal way of being. I think he totally come out of his comfort zone to do that, which I actually respect. To be fair, I think that's something that's really tough to do. What would you say about Nick's performance? Oh, we've got him on the screen now.
Yeah. So for me personally, I think that he was very, very single-minded in his approach. And sorry, my dogs are barking in the background. Classic live stream. I think that for him, he apologies. I can't concentrate.
Tom, what about you? What do you think? Just while Chris is doing that, Tom, what do you think about Nick?
Yeah, it wasn't his natural. It didn't seem to be his natural style. It's exactly what was kind of needed I think in that situation, he had to get on with it. The branding was good. The taste of the liquid, unfortunately, was awful, but he couldn't be in two places in one time. I think the task does highlight the trickiness with The Apprentice in the fact that you're designing your branding and actually making the product simultaneously, which is not something you would ever do in real life, right?
Well, again, I mean, you do this, right? You invent stuff and you make products and you have to sell them in your world. Like how difficult actually is that? You know, for some of the viewers that think, oh, he's rubbish or she's rubbish, or you know, it is really hard, isn't it, to kind of get all of this together in the space of what, a good few hours based on hardly any sleep.
Exactly. So it is phenomenal what they do. They do also get given phenomenal designers. Like you sort of see that designer who's sort of penning away on stuff, and you're like, I bet that guy is like one of the best designers in the country of packaging. Yeah. And I remember on my task, it was kind of like, you know, the designer couldn't do anything that you didn't necessarily suggest, and he wouldn't tell you anything, but you could kind of ask open questions of, so which of these two, and you know, whatever he thought, you would constantly like, so you'd be sort of really listening to because they are so much better than, they're not just like, you know, 5-year-olds who doodle stuff, right? They are brilliant people.
Oh, they're amazing.
And I think they could have both teams could have listened to their designer a little bit more. But yeah, that's what I do in real life. You know, this is one of ours. I think we've sold well over 1 million of these now. This is the Style Pro makeup brush cleaner. I don't know if the blur takes that off.
Yes, Style Pro makeup brush cleaner is absolutely outstanding. I have to say to you, viewers and listeners, seriously, if you apply makeup, male or female, don't matter where you are, if you use makeup for whatever, generally, this is a revelation. Like we've got the Style Pro in our house. You know, I've got 3 daughters. I've also got my wife. I also tend a bit of makeup myself as well, no problem. This thing is a revelation. The revolutions, the way it spins, this dries within 10 seconds, right, Tom? I'm not being an advert for your product, but it's true, right? This thing not only washes your brushes, but it dries it within 10 seconds and you can go again. It is literally, I've never seen anything like it.
Thank you, man. It's been amazing, and it took a long time to make it work, and it took a long time to do the branding, and you know, we didn't have to do the branding at the same time as doing the designing of the product simultaneously, and then come together and go, oh, you've got no peach on the label, but it's got peach in it. But that's also what makes the program so funny, right? Because you're sort of deliberately stitching people up, but people that potentially slightly deserve to be stitched up a little bit. So you know, it's
so Chris,
what else is it telling us?
Now I've got over my the hounds have actually shut up. I can start talking again. So so I think what was interesting with Nick, as you can see here, he did demonstrate the leadership. He was quite organised in keeping people on point and keeping them to task, and I think he did demonstrate some commercial awareness. But I think that for me personally, I think it was a risky approach that he took. A vodka lime and soda as a drink is fairly simple and fairly bland, and you're almost kind of limiting your audience, I think, as well there. So you know, I think that it did work in the end, but did it work because of how poor the beer tasted, essentially, that was created? Almost like the best of a bad bunch, I think the phrase is. And so I think that product wise, yes, I think he did okay with the branding. I think he was going for that that level of like sophistication. But when he talked to the Asda guy, and he was like, he just completely missed the point. You know, he started talking about, we want to go high end, and this guy's like, we're Asda. And I just think this is the second time he's done that, when he's been pitching to a customer in the series and he's made a faux pas.
Isn't it? Like
for me, it's some of that commercial awareness and people skills that I think he potentially lacks. So I think he's got some strengths, and I think he actually was his best week out of the 3. But I think there's some fundamental flaws there that I'd be interested to see if he's going to put his foot in his mouth again. In the coming weeks and get found out.
I have to say, guys, viewers and listeners as well, like, I did actually quite like the name Vodify, regardless of what the drink turned out like. I actually thought the name was actually really good. I can't remember who came up with that. Maybe that was Nick. I'm not sure. But Vodify, for basically the drink that they were looking at, is like modifying vodka. I thought that was quite clever. I thought that was quite good. Smart. I remember in Task 9 we had to invent a new box of tissues. in our series back in the day, and I never forget it because we were doing brainstorming and all sorts of stuff was coming out in the brainstorm, and I ended up saying a tissue, and people were like, what? And I was like, you know, when you sneeze and you go a tissue, you're actually asking for one, and that's what we called it. We called it a tissue.
Amazing.
That's cool. I do love them tasks, but it's really interesting.
What I think people at home don't necessarily realize is they actually do trademark searches there and then to see if anyone's got that, and if someone has, you get, so some of the best names you come up with, they're like, no, you can't have that, you can't have that, you can't, and someone's checking them in real time. So often the names are like, I remember one task we came up with like 20 names, like no, can't, no, and you're like, oh, for God's sake, please.
And it's the other thing as well, you know, kind of some of them behind the scenes stuff as well, is that again, technology's moved on miles since I won in 2008, but you couldn't use internet for certain stuff. I mean, this was back in we had Chryslers, right? So we're back in the Chrysler, in the back of a Chrysler with a yellow page or whatever, trying to find things. Again, it's really difficult to do that, you know, when you're under time pressure, and then you've got people saying to you, right, you've got to hurry up. I mean, you referenced, you know, the tea, running across London to get the tea. Task 7 for us, it was the first time I project managed. We went to Morocco, and it was the south, like finding the items task, and we had to find a juicer machine. I mean, this is honestly, if there's a clip on the internet, please go and find it, everyone, because it's hilarious. We were literally about 35 seconds away from losing the task, and we put out, and all the local people were trying to help us find this like orange juicer machine, and all of a sudden, I swear I'm not making this up, this fella comes round the corner on a motorbike with a juicer in his hands, and he's like, I got one. We were like, oh, it was just pandemic. It's like we'd won the FA Cup or something. Absolutely amazing. It's brilliant stuff. So it does test you in all sorts of ways. Let's talk a little bit then, Tom, about kind of the decisions. Let's get into the boardroom. We had a bit of a laugh with you, obviously, earlier about how many times you've been in the boardroom and stuff. What's it like in the boardroom, and do you think that they played it right? I know we talked about, you know, Sophie saying actually you just fire both of them, but do you think the result was right this week for Navid to go? I know you've lost your sweepstake, but what do you think about the boardroom performance?
I think Navid was right to go this week. I think he was going to kind of go in the first 5 weeks. Was my feeling. I don't know who would have gone if the other team had lost, because I think it's actually pretty close. It was I think it was probably one customer that made the difference. So that could have gone either way. Obviously the customer just bought it on the branding, probably didn't even taste the liquid, you know, or just thought, well, they'll change the liquid to be nice enough or whatever
to make it look taste nicer. Actually, you mentioned about kind of that sales thing earlier with Amy. Akshay was the guy that was sort of saying, well, I sold the most amount of units. And look, being a kind of a trades person myself, like a salesperson myself, I kind of know that actually you're almost half safe in the apprentice process if you've contributed in a task. If you've contributed well in a task, you're almost half safe. But when somebody starts coming up, putting their hand up saying, I sold more than anyone else, sometimes it's quite hard to argue against. But he was getting quite a lot of backlash, I thought, from his teammates. I know that they won, so it didn't really matter in the end. But you know, for Akshay, he was kind of putting his head again above the parapet, saying, I'm almost better than anyone else.
Yeah, and that's always a dangerous game to play in life, and definitely in the apprentice. You know, if you start, no one really likes something a boaster, as my 8-year-old will call it. Stop boasting, he says to his little sister. It's not the most redeeming characteristic, and it really doesn't help you in the boardroom. It's best that Karen or Tim or Lord Sugar says that you did something well, and then you just say thank you, and then you shut up. You don't go on about your successes, because the likelihood is you also made some pretty big cock ups at the same time. Because it's such a pressured process, right? So for every good thing you do, you usually make big mistakes too.
No, absolutely.
I think that Akshay has mildly improved. You know, from a low point in the first week where, you know, he managed to kind of annoy quite a lot of people, and then holding back in the second week where I think he realized he'd overstepped his mark. I think he was a bit more measured in his approach, but he still had the annoying gene a little bit in terms of, you know, the ability to rub people up the wrong way. So in terms of the pure scoring, he wasn't in the bottom 3. I think that as you can see from the statistics here, you know, Navid scored only 2 points, and I think that he really, I think he just seemed out of his depth in terms of his approach. You know, he was challenged on certain things around whether it was the branding or the sales or him being involved, and he rolled over. He did not essentially stand up to any criticism or put himself forward to be part of it. And I just don't know. I don't know what his motivations for going on the show were, but I felt that he maybe lacked the business.
I was going to say I wanted to ask that question. You've stepped upon something there, Chris. So Tom, directly, do you think that there is a few candidates, or Naveed maybe, but that go on the show not to win it? They go on the show for a different motivation. I mean, I don't want to speculate, but use your show, your series as an example. I can pretty much say that in my series, I would say maybe 5 or 6 people actually wanted to win. I think the rest of them were there for TV purposes. What's your take on that?
I think it's difficult. I think some people are a bit like disconnected from reality.
For reality TV,
and kind of go in thinking they probably will win it. And I don't know Navid's business idea. Maybe he's got an epic one, but he probably did go in there. People might say that he went in there just for the publicity, but he probably did think he was going to win it. And the same with Harry, was very confident that he would have won it if he'd been allowed to stay in another week. He almost talked himself out. Crackers. There are some serious candidates in there. I've looked forward to hearing about the business plan. I think a bit gets said these days about, it's just a business plan that saves them, and what's the point? It's all about the business plan. I think there's a little bit of that, but I don't think Lord Sugar actually allows himself to look at the business plans until a bit later on. I kind of have the feeling that he's more about, okay, well, no matter what business plan we get, it's more about that individual that I'm backing, not necessarily because we can tweak the business plan into it.
100%. I agree with that bit. I mean, I think for me, when you get to the top, and I said this earlier in the show, when you get to the top 5, you've got a real chance. And I think by that point, you've gone through 10 weeks, because the 11th week is your top 5. So 10 weeks of full-on assessment process. So assessing, watching, observing Tim and Karen and Lord Sugar, all that data, all that information on you over that period of time. They can see whether or not you can sell. They can see whether or not you can develop. They can see whether or not you can lead. All these different scenarios, that gives them a real good opportunity to say, right, okay, these top 5 people, but bearing in mind, yes, their business plans as well, I would probably hire or take on as my next business partner any of these top 5. Now we're going to start testing them in the finale around their business plans. And I think that's the way to look at it for me, is that you've got to take these, top 16 down to the top 5 before you start making any sorts of decisions. And that's what each task does, doesn't it? It tests you. It's the observation of watching, looking, seeing. Lord Sugar, can he work with somebody like Alex? Can actually be the person that he wants to be with? Is Tom? Could he make money with Tom from a? Do you know what I mean? All of these different things, and that's what he essentially is seeing, along with Karen and Tim, every single week, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a brilliant interview and VC process, right? I'm sure the investors who are coming to you at the moment would just love to put you through, something and see how you'd all do, because you learn a huge amount about people in that process, and you find out if they're really up for it. We talked a little bit about body language, and I think you'll find in the next few weeks there are some people who look like they're really tiring, and they're not going to make it, and some people who are really being spurred on by it. Because they want it even more now.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because again, it's almost when you realize the nature of the task, it's actually, have I got the kind of the strength and resilience to push all the way through? And I think that a couple of interesting points, Lee, if we go back to the bottom 3 this week in terms of scoring, is that Akeem now has been in the bottom 3 in terms of scoring 2 weeks in a row. If you remember, he put himself out in the first week, really, made the faux pas around the sign that looks like essentially a turd, and he was quiet last week, and he was quiet this week. I mean, I struggled to score him in terms of anything that he contributed, and I'm wondering whether he feels out of his depth and whether he has had that worry about the task in front of him. I think that he could be one to potentially go next week. The other side of it, which again I was quite surprised, was Francesca. So Francesca in the first week, she demonstrated a lot of drive and desire, but didn't have a lot of chance to contribute. She was almost sidelined by Catherine, I think, intentionally. And then as project manager in the second week, she absolutely nailed it. And then, take her out of the limelight this week, and she didn't contribute necessarily many ideas from a creative process. And she flunked the sales, which I think was really interesting because that was her strongest point the week before. So she's showing a bit of inconsistency, which I was really surprised about. But I guess, did you see that, Tom, in yours, where sometimes somebody was strong one week and then weaker the next, or they demonstrated some natural skills in different areas?
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. Lee, you seem to remember a lot about your series. I've wiped it a lot from my memory.
I suppose back every week.
I suppose someone like Vincent, someone like Jim was very good every week. Jedi Jim, he was just brilliant. Helen was also very, very good, but in a slightly different way. Someone like Vincent, I suppose he could be very good and then non-existent the following week. He was the only one who had kids. And I think he really struggled with that. And I would really struggle now, being away from my kids for 10 weeks. That would really bug me, I think. Whereas I was single at the time and, had nowhere better to be, quite frankly. Ironically, the Apprentice house was only about a mile away from where I lived as well.
Oh, really? You could go home?
Yeah, on the first night I very nearly did, because I was like, God, this bed's uncomfortable. Can I just go home? Because they have so many. You must remember, Lee, because they have so many beds, right? In week one, and they're going to lose a person in 3 days' time. So it's not like they really splash out on the pillows and the beds. Basically. So we will see. But it is quite up and down. But it's that consistency, and hopefully that consistency of building. Like, I don't think many people even saw me for the first few weeks. I was probably a bit quiet.
I do think that has something to do with it as well. We're watching it as live as the viewers are watching it as well, the show. So actually, we've only got the power of the edit to make the decisions. Whereas actually, of course, Lord Sugar, Tim, and Karen have got they actually see everything that happens in real time. So I think that has something to do with it. Maybe with Francesca, I'd maybe put that down to she's had a couple of decent weeks. She's had maybe a quieter week. Maybe she'll come to fruition again in the next couple. Like you said, Tom, and I think it was perfect synopsis. It isn't a short-term thing. It isn't a sprint. It is a bit of a marathon. This whole process. So don't peak too early. Get yourself involved, put yourself in there, and then maybe just step back a bit and then see how things are going, and then put yourself again. Just come back to my experience. I didn't project manage until week 7. I end up managing 3 times and winning 3 times as project manager, but I didn't manage until week 7. So maybe you could say that I was in the background a bit. I don't know how I could be in the background, but maybe I was. So Tom, what do you think? Do you think Lord Sugar got it right this week? I know that you had Navid in the sweepstake, but do you think Lord Sugar got it right this week, firing Navid?
Yeah, I don't know if he necessarily got it right this way. I don't think it's necessarily who's the worst on this task of that, but I don't think Navid was going to be in the final 5, and I think this week was his week to go. I think Akash, I'd like to see a bit more of him. Yeah. As you say, he's learned some things, which is very good. But if he's in the final 3 in the next week or the week after, he's gone. You can't be in it 4 times in a row, because there's always a sort of no smoke without fire kind of thing.
Lord Jim will say that as well, won't he? He'll know that, and he's clever in a sense that there's something going on there if you're consistently being in the bottom 3 all of the time.
Yeah. I think Akeem, if he's on the losing team next time, he could be in trouble. I think Nick this week, if Nick's team had lost, he might have been in trouble.
Yeah. I think he would have been probably because of Chris, what you said right at the beginning. He was very bold in his decisions. His interpersonal skills weren't great. He knew that he had to do something, and he just went on and done it. And if that had a backfire,
and the Asda buyer, Asda's enormous, right? You totally pitch wrong to Asda. You have no empathy for the Asda consumer. Even if you're telling Waitrose 1 minute it's a you know, pure high-end brand, blah, blah, blah. You've got to change your pitch for Asda, otherwise you're toast.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
that's really bad sales.
What about who's catching your eye? You mentioned a couple right at the beginning. Maybe a Francesca, Chris, that you mentioned. Maybe she's dropped off a little bit this week. But who are you kind of thinking there's a one or two to watch here, Tom? Who would your recommendation be to get into the top 5 at this stage?
Well, Catherine's doing well. I'm seeing her a lot in the press though, in the actual press media at the moment, which sort of suggests that, and this is a bit of sort of I don't know if I should say this, but sort of suggests that she's probably not into the final 3, because if she was, she'd be managed a bit better by the PR. And so it looks like she's just trying to get as much publicity as she can during the process because she doesn't win it. But I think she is doing pretty well. I'd like to see more of Aaron. He seems like he's got a good head on his shoulders. He's calm, he's concise, but I haven't necessarily seen him shine that much. He just doesn't.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? He seems like a good guy. Alex interests me. I don't know where that. I don't know. I haven't seen enough of him.
We talked about this last week, didn't we, Chris, with Mark? Alex seems to be kind of very quiet so far in comparison to some of the other candidates, but again, maybe that's because we kind of understand how that's going to go in the next, week 4, 5, or 6 or whatever. But he also seems like a character that maybe Lord Sugar quite likes. I mean, if you look at Ricky, if you look at Mark, if you look at me, just as an example, we're probably the similar sort of characters to an Alex, maybe a Joseph, some of the lads that have won. I don't know. Is that because
professional, slick? Doesn't chat like that. She can't be doing with. And a commercial cleaning company, you've no idea if that's like him and his mum or if it's him and 500 people.
Yeah,
and commercial cleaning, you've got to be on it to get that right, because you can, that's a professional. It's a very professional business. So that could be interesting. Also, you sometimes wonder, is it actually all his business, or is he? Because we've had a few in the past, like Michaela from a couple of seasons ago was flipping brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But she wants to take another business and not the other 3 businesses she had, and basically she pushed herself out of it. In some respects. I don't know if you remember her story. That can all come. So those 3 I haven't seen her. Sophie, it was a shame she was a bit standoffish at the end of that, like almost like she had resigned to giving up.
But it's interesting you said that, Tom, because you've earmarked Sophie as maybe has she got the the stamina for this process? Because again, for the viewers and listeners, it is difficult. Like it's nothing like normal work. It is really, really hard. That phone call, again, back me up here, Tom, if you will. That phone call's real. Like, I know a lot of people think that phone call's fake, and that that there's a task next day. You have no idea. You don't know if you're going to have a day off. You don't know. That phone call rings and you go, they got half an hour, and you're thinking, how am I going to do this Barnet in half an hour? It's just not going to happen. But it's true, isn't it?
Like that.
That is put on you.
Yeah, and it's 4:30. They're not messing about. That is 4:30. There was one night I pretty much slept in my clothes because I was like, I've got a feeling they're coming in early tomorrow. And they came in through the hedge. They came over the back wall and they broke in, and they were livid that I was already dressed. I'm like, how are you already dressed? I was like, well, I just had this feeling that you were going to be in early tomorrow. I think someone of the camera crew had sort of inadvertently mentioned something, but you've just got to be ready at any time, haven't you?
Yeah, I remember. We finished the laundry task. It was task 2. We finished the laundry task at about 2:30 in the morning. Wow. And some people that work 12-hour shifts, 14-hour shifts, whatever, they're thinking, oh, whatever, and that's fine. Like, I get it. But then when we got back, you know what it's like. You have to do the filming of what happened on the task. So we're sitting in the house doing the post filming of task at 2:30 in the morning, and that is how it works. So very, very tiring. And then boom, the phone rings at like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. You go again, and you do that relentlessly all the time for 6 weeks, 7 weeks, and all of a sudden you're thinking, I'm not sure I can do this. And that's why some of the the personalities and makeup of the characters of who we've got this year is going to determine if they go on to win it or not. Let's have a prediction, Tom. Who do you think at this stage will win this year's Apprentice?
Oh, I don't know enough. I couldn't say. Final five is a bit more easy. Like, also, I haven't seen enough of Harpreet. Like, she was good. Like, she could be out there. Stephanie, I'm not so sure about. Alex, I think, could be in the final five. Aaron, I don't know enough about, but he's got the mentality that he feels like he could be in the final five.
Yeah.
Cachet feels like too much of a long shot now. He's been in the final three too many times, and so, and with Catherine, and then I don't think Amy, but I don't know about Brittany, Francesca, Harpreet. I don't know which one of those, one or two. Sophie.
Feels like more females than males, though, doesn't it, Tom and Chris? To be fair,
it does. Although in my series we got down to two males quite quickly, and then we stayed till the end. It was quite good. Jim and I, it was excellent because we could then share a room. We knew we'd never be on the same team again because they couldn't have the two guys on the one team, so we could actually be mates. And that was quite nice. And then gradually all the girls sort of went around us, as it were. Oh, it's a brilliant show. It's a brilliant show.
It's fantastic reminiscing as well, to be fair. Yeah. Well, look, it's been, I can't pressure, I can't get a prediction on your winner out, but your top five is there for everyone to see. It's been an absolute ball having you on this week. Would love you to come back on later on in the series if you're up for it, Tom. What I'm hoping to do in either the finale in the final, or in the interview task is to have a few of the previous winners on at the same time. So if your diary will allow us, I'd like to get you back on. It'd be absolutely fantastic. Just tell us a little bit about you, where people can find you, how they can follow you. You're on LinkedIn, aren't you? On Twitter, brilliant following on Twitter and on Instagram, that sort of stuff.
Thank you. Yeah. On Twitter, I'm at Inventor_Tom. On Instagram, it's at StylePro_UK. StylePro with no e's. StylePro. Where is it? There we go. The blur will come off. _UK. One thing I've got to do some info. How do I turn the blur off on this thing? Camera virtual background none. Right.
Promo.
Have you heard about this?
Oh, okay. This is Lord Sugar. The pen, right? Yes.
This is the pen. Bless him, Lord Sugar. He found this supplier, so he's got the. So I've helped him out with all the legal stuff, and it's our warehouse and website that's processing this. So all £10 that you buy for this on sugarpens.com, all £10 is going to Great Ormond Street charity.
Amazing!
It's a pen at one end, and it's a pointing. So for any and he was on the One Show a few weeks ago, and we suddenly sold thousands in an evening. Unbelievable. We actually went out of stock, and he was really angry with me because I clicked the button, which meant we stopped selling when we went out of stock. He was like, well, so it's a great little apprentice gift. So we've been helping out with that, and then all the other beauty stuff. Recently, 4-in-1 steamer, aromatherapy, all that kind of stuff. All StylePro, all available on our website, on Amazon, on ASOS, Argos. I'm very lucky to, but I think it's really important for me to say on this that it's not just me anymore. Like my company, as you mentioned, with Chris, there's a team now of 12 of us. Salespeople, marketing people, supply chain people. I head it. My head has to sort of sign off on certain things, but I'm lucky enough to have been able to build a business with Lord Sugar's help and money that now employs amazing people. And so we work together. So I'm more involved in the product side, but it's a team sport these days. It's not The Apprentice. It's not just me trying to fight against everyone else. Everyone around,
Tom, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for taking the time. So there you have it. The search, as we know now, it is well and truly on. 3 episodes down. Unfortunately, we lost Shama as well this week. So we're actually 4 candidates down. We'll be back next week. Actually, this week live. We're coming to you live on Friday morning at 8:30. Get that scheduled in with the brilliant Alana Spencer, another previous winner of the show, to review Task 4, which is essentially the fishing task. Now, I know a little bit about fishing in The Apprentice. I've had my own experience with fish, having to sell them on a market stall in the very first episode back in 2008. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. See you next time on In the Line of Hire. Thanks for watching.